This is the Falkland Island Dependency Survey's Base F, or Wordie Hut, after James Wordie, the scientist on Shackleton's transcontinental expedition. It was built in 1947, but it wasn't actually the first hut here. The original hut to be built in this location was built in 1935 by the British Graham Land expedition. They sailed from Great Britain in 1934 and arriving on two different ships at Port Lockroy, both the Penola, their main expedition vessel, and the RRS Discovery II, a survey ship for Great Britain. They arrive at Port Lockroy, combine their team, and then sail looking for a place to establish their winter base. They were hoping to get further south, but they'd arrived too late in the season, and as a result of the ice, they were forced to choose a base somewhere further north on the peninsula. They'd brought with them an aircraft, a de Havilland Moth, and surveying the surrounding area, the captain of the Penola, Robert Ryder, a young naval officer, spotted this low-lying group of islands just south of the Lemaire Channel. These are the Argentine Islands, and as he flew above them, he spotted various little inlets that would make a perfect anchorage for the Penola. In January 1935, the Penola sailed into one of these little inlets, and Ryder dropped anchor just north of this little headland behind me. It was the perfect spot. The men unloaded a prefabricated hut, which they were able to assemble in 3 weeks. And then, as the Penola was slowly iced into its little harbour, they moved into this hut and spent the winter here. Now the men had brought rations with them, supplies, mainly pemmican, upon which they could survive the coming winter, but they wanted to utilise the local wildlife to help supplement their diet, and so they held taste tests of the various different meats. Penguin was found to take too long to prepare and wasn't really worth the effort. Weddell seal meat was found best saved for their sled dogs. Leopard seals, even the sled dogs wouldn't touch. But they did find that crab-eater seal was quite delicious. And so after gathering quite a large harvest, almost 100 of them, they stored them in an ice cave on the ice cap just overlooking the newly built hut. This hut then serves as the base for their operations for the winter of 1935. They carry out sledding expeditions and flights across the surrounding area, charting much of this part of the Antarctic Peninsula. After the winter of 1935, the British Graham Land expedition moved further south, and in 1936 they find a new overwintering base in Marguerite Bay. But they leave this hut here as a potential refuge for the future. The British next visit again 10 years later, when the Falkland Island Dependency Survey arrives in Antarctica. This is a newly formed civilian organisation that's taking over the military Operation Tabarin that set up bases at Deception Island and Port Lockroy in 1944. And this expedition is led by none other than Edward Bingham, who had been one of the party members of the British Graham Land expedition. They visit this hut and find it still intact and weathertight, although it's been daubed with paint, claiming that it is now Argentinian property. They remove this, and Bingham's companions sensibly leave him with some time to himself in his old digs that he spent a year in here. The Falkland Island Dependency Survey moves on and sets up a base at Stonington Island. When they return here the following year, in 1947, they're shocked to find that the hut has vanished. Now, at first, there's some suspicion that perhaps the Argentines have removed it, but later on it's found out that a tsunami that actually originated in the Aleutian Islands and had crossed the Pacific had swept this hut away. The swell had driven up through the passage behind the hut and obliterated it. Bits of timber were found on the ice shelf behind the hut. So in 1947, this new hut is built and christened Wordie Hut. This remains a base for the Falkland Island Dependency Survey right up until 1954, when they set up a new accommodation building on the neighbouring island. And that base remains in operation until 1996, when it is sold to Ukraine for the symbolic sum of £1. Today, it remains a Ukrainian base, Vernadsky base, named after one of their scientists born in the late 19th century. And incredibly today, that, along with Base F, holds the record for the longest climate record in all of Antarctica. But Wordie Hut remains here, Maintained by the United Kingdom Antarctic Heritage Trust, it has been restored and is kept weathertight throughout the season so that we can visit it and see what life was like in these huts. And there are all manner of interesting things to discover. Just above the door is what appears to be a horseshoe, but on closer inspection, it's actually the heel from a British Army ammo boot, a Second World War boot worn by the British infantry. And the reason it's up there is because most of the men who were based here were using military surplus kit in the 1940s and 1950s, but they modified their ammo boots and put cleats on them for working in the ice and the snow. And in the ground around here, you'll find lots of those hobnail heel sections. Inside, you'll find all manner of rations, but also kit that seems more appropriate to the Second World War. Typewriters, radio equipment, and even serge battlefield trousers. Places like this are time capsules, preserving life in Antarctica from 70 years ago. And it's an absolutely fascinating place to visit.